My name is Helena Turner, and at 23 years of age, I finally walked across the stage to receive my degree in environmental science. It had been 4 grueling years of juggling part-time jobs, sleepless nights, and relentless worry over tuition. Each morning I rose before dawn to stock shelves at the Cornerstone Market, and each evening I waited tables at the Harborview Bistro, my feet aching by the time I returned to the cramped basement apartment I shared with 2 roommates. I survived on instant oatmeal, peanut butter sandwiches, and the occasional free entree courtesy of the bistro manager who knew my name and my story. Growing up in Willow Ridge, a small town hugging the shores of Puget Sound in Washington state, my family of 4 lived modestly in a faded craftsman bungalow. My mother, Clara, taught grade school math. My father, Thomas, worked as a diesel mechanic. They preached the gospel of financial responsibility. Live within your means, they would say, or you'll drown in debt. Money conversations always circled back to mortgages, utility bills, and the ever-increasing cost of raising children in modern America. Despite our tight budget, my grandmother, Agnes Monroe, lived 300 miles south in Eugene, Oregon. She was my anchor. Every holiday she sent a care package filled with homemade granola bars, letters of encouragement, and a crisp $50 bill tucked inside a card. When I left home for university, her weekly phone calls became the highlight of my week. Her warm voice reminded me that someone believed in me beyond metrics and margins. The months leading up to graduation blurred into a haze of cap and gown fittings, career workshops, and frantic last-minute research papers. I applied for every internship I could find, some unpaid, some barely covering my bus fare, determined to emerge from college without drowning in loans. When acceptance letters arrived, none came with full scholarships, only small stipends that barely scratched the surface of my mounting expenses. My parents offered what help they could. They sat me down one rainy September afternoon, spreadsheets spread across the kitchen table. "We'll chip in," my mother began, voice steady, "but you'll need loans and a job." "I understand," I replied, trying to hide the tremor in my voice. The word loans itself sounded like a death sentence, a leash tightening around my future. By the season of my graduation ceremony, debt hovered around $45,000. Every paycheck disappeared almost as soon as it arrived, covering tuition installments, rent, and essentials. I had never felt more proud and more exhausted in my life. The night of my celebration, my parents insisted on taking me to the Argentum, a 5-star restaurant perched atop a glass tower in downtown Seattle. My pulse quickened as we stepped into the opulent lobby, marble floors, ambient lighting, and a maître d' who addressed us by name. I felt out of place in my simple floral dress, clutching a worn leather purse. My parents, on the other hand, seemed unflustered. My mother carried a designer tote that caught the light. My father's cufflinks glinted as he smiled. My younger brother, Ethan, fresh out of high school at 18, lounged in the booth beside me, scrolling through his phone. He'd barely mentioned my graduation, his mind already on his own plans, but tonight he wore a supportive grin. My Aunt Marisol, Clara's sister, and Uncle Victor, Thomas's younger brother, joined us shortly after, each offering congratulations and subtle nods of approval. Agnes arrived last, as was her habit, her silver hair neatly curled and a small wrapped box in hand. The sparkle in her blue-gray eyes ignited something in me, a reminder of every sacrifice she had made so I could pursue my dreams. She kissed me gently on the cheek and whispered, "My brilliant girl, you made it." Her joy felt genuine, unmarred by any hidden agenda. As the evening unfolded, delicate appetizers arrived: seared scallops, heirloom tomato tarts, and microgreen salads. The clink of crystal and low hum of conversation surrounded us. I relaxed for the first time in years, reveling in the warmth of family pride. My parents toasted me with a full-bodied Chardonnay, declaring that every penny they spent tonight was worth my achievement. Yet as I studied their polite smiles and the extravagant menu, a flicker of unease sparked within me. Why such lavish generosity all at once? Why had they always claimed money was too tight when I pleaded for extra dollars to cover textbooks or car repairs? Doubts drifted through my mind, but I silenced them, determined not to let shadows spoil this night. Little did I know that the seeds of doubt I buried would soon blossom into a revelation that would shatter everything I thought I knew about family, sacrifice, and trust. The triumphant applause still echoed in my ears, but behind the opulence lurked a betrayal that would redefine the story of my life. The main courses arrived in a flourish of silverware and polished presentation: slow-braised short ribs nestled against a puree of roasted parsnips, truffle-infused risotto, crowned with wild mushrooms, and a vibrant citrus-glazed salmon atop sautéed spinach. Each dish looked as much a work of art as it tasted divine. I savored the flavors, closing my eyes to absorb every bite, letting the succulent meat and earthy mushrooms wash away the months of ramen and instant noodles. Across from me, my mother Clara dabbed at her lips with a linen napkin, her designer earrings catching the candlelight. My father Thomas leaned back, his broad frame relaxed, now that the celebratory tension had overtaken any lingering worry. Aunt Marisol and Uncle Victor exchanged stories of their own career triumphs, Marisol recounting a recent gallery opening, Victor boasting of landing a high-profile client at his law firm. Ethan, my brother, nodded along politely, though his attention drifted to his phone, where I suspected Instagram photos of friends at a spring break beach party scrolled endlessly. Every now and then Grandma Agnes would lean in, her voice soft but full of warmth. "Remember when you organized that beach cleanup at 9 years old, Helen?" she asked, using the family nickname. "You were already showing the world your passion for the environment." She smiled at me, pride radiating from her face. I felt that familiar tug in my chest, gratitude for her unwavering support, a lifeline through the toughest times. I shared snippets of my future plans: an interview scheduled with Evergreen Innovations, a small startup focused on sustainable packaging solutions. The salary was modest, but the mission aligned perfectly with my values. I confessed that I'd spent the past week drafting a budget, calculating how much I could allocate towards student loans each month, and how little would remain for rent or groceries. My parents listened attentively, nodding encouragement. A small knot formed in my stomach. Their empathy seemed genuine, but my lingering doubts whispered of a deeper story. As I spoke, I noticed subtle shifts in family dynamics. My mother's gaze flickered to my father each time I mentioned my financial calculations. My father shifted in his chair, brushing invisible crumbs from his lap. Aunt Marisol's sympathetic smile grew taut, as if she were on the edge of saying something but held back. Uncle Victor's usual confidence felt tinged with anticipation, his posture rigid. Even Ethan's phone glowed a little brighter, his head bent over the screen as if he awaited an incoming text. The soft glow of candlelight danced across the table, mingling with the hush of the restaurant. Above us, the glass tower's windows revealed the sprawling city skyline, a tapestry of lights stretching into the dark Pacific horizon. The contrast between the world outside, teeming with opportunity, and the suffocating intimacy of our booth pressed against my senses. I forced a deep breath, reminding myself this was my night, my celebration. Then, just as the waiter cleared the plates and approached with the dessert menus, Grandma Agnes placed her hand gently over mine. Her skin was cool against mine, a reassuring anchor. "Helen," she began, voice low enough that only I could hear, "there's something I need to talk to you about." I looked into her eyes, searching for what lay beneath their usual warmth. "After dessert," she said, nodding toward the menu. "I have a question, something important." Her words, innocent as they seemed, jolted me. A shiver traced my spine. I managed a small smile. "Of course, Grandma," I whispered. Even as I said the words, a sliver of apprehension wound through me. What could be so urgent? The waiter returned with 2 gold-embossed menus. I opened mine to find an array of decadent sweets, lavender crème brûlée, petit four dusted in edible gold, and a molten chocolate cake promising a center of warm ganache. I selected the lavender crème brûlée, hoping its sweet fragrance might ease the sudden tension tightening around my heart. Ethan ordered a dark chocolate soufflé. My parents opted for the citrus tartlets, complementing the wine's final notes. As we awaited our desserts, the conversation drifted to nostalgia. Uncle Victor asked about my favorite college memory. I described a midnight paddleboard excursion across Lake Union, the water glowing with bioluminescent algae, a moment when I felt utterly connected to the natural world. My parents listened with proud smiles, their eyes soft. But behind those smiles lurked an undercurrent I couldn't yet name. When the crème brûlée arrived, the waiter carefully torched the sugar crust until it crackled. I tapped it, hearing the satisfying snap, and then scooped a spoonful. The velvety custard was fragrant with lavender and vanilla, sweet yet delicate. For a moment, I allowed myself to linger in this perfection, until I noticed my grandmother's expression shift. She watched me eat, her eyes narrowing not in judgment, but in profound concern. Suddenly, I felt every molecule of air in the room thicken. I set my spoon aside and looked up at Grandma Agnes. She cleared her throat, raising her voice just enough to cut through the ambient hum. "Helen," she repeated, more firmly this time, "I've been sending money to your parents for years, thousands of dollars every month. What I intended for your education and living expenses, did you ever receive any of it?" Time dilated. The echo of her words swirled around me as I blinked, certain I'd misheard. My hand trembled, and the spoon clattered against the porcelain dish. Across the table, heads turned. The nearby diners leaned in, drawn by the sudden hush and the undercurrent of drama. I stared at my grandmother, astonished. "My money?" I whispered, voice dry and distant. "Grandma, I never saw a single cent." Her face fell. Then, as realization spread like ice through the group, expressions of shock, guilt, and something darker flickered across every face at the table. My stomach churned. The celebratory dinner I had dreamed of had shifted into a crucible of betrayal. The next words were poised on everyone's lips, waiting to either shatter or redefine the fragile bonds we had struggled to maintain. Silence settled like a dense fog over the table. The flickering candlelight cast elongated shadows across my family's faces, now etched with disbelief, shame, and resentment. I stared at Grandma Agnes, her hand still hovering over mine. Outside the towering windows, Seattle's lights pulsed on, oblivious to the drama unfolding within the Argentum's elegant walls. My voice felt distant when I finally spoke. "How much have you been sending?" I managed, each word resonating as if through a tunnel. $3,000 every month, she said softly, eyes glistening. "Since the fall before your freshman year, 40+ months in total." I sank back against the plush banquette, my heartbeat thundering in my ears. My mind raced through calculations. 3,000 times 40 equals $120,000. $120,000 that I had never seen. Dollars that could have covered tuition, rent, textbooks, a sturdy laptop, or even a chance to study abroad. But instead, for years, I had scraped by on ramen and spare shifts. I turned toward my parents. Their faces had gone ashen. Clara's manicured fingers tightened around her napkin. Thomas ran a hand through his hair, eyes avoiding mine. "Is this true?" I asked them, voice trembling between indignation and grief. My mother swallowed hard. We paid tuition," she said, voice wavering. "And we used the rest for household expenses." "Household expenses?" I echoed, incredulous. "Like new furniture? Vacations? Ethan's summer program?" I gestured toward my brother, who sat frozen in shock. "The allowance you gave him, was that real, or was it part of this money too?" Ethan's face paled. He looked from me to our parents, hurt and confusion swirling in his eyes. He hadn't known. He too was a casualty of their deception. Grandma Agnes's expression hardened as she listened. She had lived in Eugene on a modest pension. Every dollar she sent had been intended to ease my burden, not enrich her children. I saw her hands tighten around her purse, as though she might tear it open and demand back every receipt. Instead, she drew a slow breath. "My dear," she said, voice both gentle and resolute, "I thought I was helping, but you've been robbed of these years. You deserve an explanation and restitution." Tears burned behind my eyes, a mix of humiliation and righteous anger. My grandmother's betrayal stung less than my parents'. I had grown up trusting them implicitly, believing their steady advice, their occasional gifts, their matter-of-fact pronouncements about finances. All the while, behind that facade, they had crafted a lie more elaborate than I could have imagined. My father finally spoke, voice hoarse. "Helen, we never meant to hurt you. We thought we were doing what was best for the family." "For you," I corrected. "You thought you were doing what was best for yourselves." My Aunt Marisol reached across the table, placing a consoling hand on Agnes's arm. "We need to handle this calmly," she urged. "Perhaps take this conversation somewhere more private." But privacy felt like a trap. I needed this moment witnessed by everyone, to acknowledge the torment I'd endured alone. I needed them to feel the weight of their choices. "No," I said firmly, rising to my feet despite the tremor in my legs. "I want the truth here, now." I faced my parents, channeling every ounce of strength I had cultivated over years of struggle. "Grandma sent that money specifically for me, so I wouldn't have to work 3 jobs, so I could focus on my studies. Instead, you spent it on yourselves, while I borrowed loans I may never repay. Do you have any idea what you've done?" My mother's eyes filled with tears. We thought you were okay," she stammered. "You always seemed to manage." "Manage?" I echoed, voice cracking. "I was starving myself to meet deadlines. I was late on rent because of medical bills. I missed family gatherings because I had extra shifts. And you let me, lied to me, watched me suffer." My father's shoulders sagged. It got out of control, he admitted. We started small, covering a utility bill here or replacing a washer, but then we kept spending. We told ourselves we would pay it back. And yet, I said quietly, I stood here tonight celebrating the achievement you secretly undermined. My grandmother rose, placing a firm hand on my shoulder. Helen, we will make this right, she vowed, voice unwavering. I will not let this injustice stand. I looked at her, gratitude mixing with lingering hurt. I turned back to my parents. Explain to me how you plan to do that. Thomas swallowed. We will repay every cent. We will pay off your student loans immediately. We'll transfer any assets needed to do so, and we'll provide documentation, bank statements, transaction records, everything you ask for. I studied them both. Their faces were etched with remorse and fear. For the first time in my life, I felt power in this relationship. Power rooted not in love, but in truth. Good, I said, voice steady. Because anything less would be unacceptable. A hush fell over the table as the weight of those words settled. The Argentum's background music resumed, but to me, everything remained eerily silent. I took a deep breath, anchored by my grandmother's steadfast presence. The celebration was over. A new chapter, one defined by honesty and restitution, was about to begin. The clatter of silverware and hushed whispers around us seemed distant, as though I was submerged underwater, hearing only muffled echoes of a world I no longer fully inhabited. My grandmother's steady presence at my side anchored me, but every fiber of my being trembled with the enormity of what had just transpired. I turned away from my parents and looked out at the city lights, searching for clarity in their constancy. My father cleared his throat. Helen, if you're willing, we'd like to discuss specifics, how we'll arrange repayment, timelines, documentation. His voice trailed off, uncertain. I swallowed, the taste of lavender crème brûlée now a bitter memory. Yes, I said finally, meeting his gaze. Let's talk specifics. We remained at the table for another hour, though it felt like a lifetime. My grandmother guided the discussion with calm authority, referring to notes in her purse, a ledger she'd brought in anticipation of confronting the truth. She outlined the total amount sent, $3,000 monthly for 44 months, plus interest calculated from the time each payment was made. My parents nodded, heads bowed, as she read the figures aloud. My mother dabbed at her eyes with a napkin, shoulders shaking. My father's hands clenched and unclenched on the table's edge. I listened, part of me cataloguing every number, every date, while another part felt numb, detached from the woman I had been and the life I had lived. The realization cut deeper than any knife. Every sleepless night, every rationed meal, every humiliating plea for a loan extension had been unnecessary, orchestrated by the people I loved most. By the end of our conversation, my parents had agreed to a formal plan. Immediate transfer of funds to cover my outstanding student loans, plus an escrow account for any additional damage, legal fees, living expenses, emotional counseling. They committed to providing bank statements and loan documents within 7 days. My grandmother insisted on overseeing the process to assure transparency. When we left the restaurant, the Seattle night had deepened into a velvet black sky dotted with distant stars. The air was crisp, tinged with salt from the nearby Puget Sound. My grandmother slipped her arm through mine, guiding me toward her car. "I'm so proud of you, my dear," she whispered. You faced this with courage. I nodded, blinking back tears. Thank you for believing in me all these years. She smiled, but sadness flickered behind her eyes. I failed you by not asking you directly. I assumed your parents had shared everything with you. I shook my head. You did everything you could. You never imagined they would... My voice faltered. At her car, we embraced, a long, tight hug filled with generations of love and regret. Then she climbed in and drove me home, the hum of the engine a gentle counterpoint to the storm still raging inside me. In the days that followed, reality set in with almost surreal clarity. My phone buzzed non-stop. Texts from my brother Ethan expressing shock and sorrow. Messages from Aunt Marisol apologizing for her silence. Even a formal email from the Argentum's management acknowledging the incident and assuring us no further inquiries would be made about the dispute. I received a banker's notification. The transfer to pay off my student loans had been initiated. A weight lifted from my chest, yet I found myself staring at the empty ledger for hours, trying to process the injustice and the aftermath. I reached out to Dr. Rivera, the therapist who had guided me through the early stages of my post-college anxiety. I need to talk, I texted. Within 24 hours, I sat across from her in her softly lit office, the scent of eucalyptus filling the room. I feel untethered, I confessed, voice wavering. I am relieved about the loan payments, but everything I believed about my family feels shattered. She nodded, attentive. You've uncovered layers of betrayal. It's natural to grieve not just the deception, but the loss of the family you thought you had. Tears welled up. I don't know if I can ever trust them again. Trust and forgiveness are separate processes, she said gently. You can work toward forgiveness for your sake, while maintaining boundaries until trust can be rebuilt, if ever. Allow yourself to feel the pain, the anger, the betrayal. That's part of healing. Over the next week, I documented every transaction, reviewed bank statements, and prepared a detailed report for my grandmother's review. My parents sent records of utility payments, grocery bills, and receipts for family trips. I scrolled through page after page, matching dates to memories, realizing that when I was hospitalized for exhaustion in my junior year, funds meant for a new laptop had instead gone toward my parents' vacation in Whistler. My heart ached, but I remained resolute. I wanted not vengeance, but truth, accountability, and restoration, in tandem with my grandmother and Dr. Rivera. I drafted a letter outlining my emotional journey to be shared with my parents once the financial matters were settled. I wanted them to understand the depth of my suffering beyond the ledger. Writing the letter was cathartic, an exercise in owning my narrative and reclaiming my voice. Meanwhile, Ethan and I grew closer. He dropped by my apartment with care packages, home-cooked meals and blankets, offering silent solidarity. He confessed that he too had felt guilty for enjoying privileges he didn't earn. I want to help you rebuild, he said. Let me. We devised a budget together, pooling resources to furnish my new apartment with second-hand treasures, a sturdy oak desk for my home office, a comfortable couch, plants to brighten the space. Each item symbolized a step toward independence grounded in honesty. One evening, as I placed a small potted fern on the windowsill where morning sun spilled in, I felt a flicker of hope. The road ahead wouldn't be easy, mourning the family I had believed in, navigating legal restitution, repairing my self-worth, but it would be mine to walk on terms I set. That night, before sleep claimed me, I sent my letter to my parents via certified mail. In it, I spoke of love and betrayal, of dreams deferred and reclaimed, and of the possibility of rebuilding if they chose transparency over secrecy. I signed it, Love, your daughter, Helena. As I lay in bed, the city's lights shimmering through the window, I realized that for the first time in years, I felt an ember of peace. The path was uncertain, but I walked it with truth as my compass, and that, I knew, would guide me home. Dawn broke over Seattle in soft pastel hues, casting a gentle light across my living room. I sat at my small oak desk, sipping strong black coffee and rereading the letter I'd sent to my parents. The cursor on my laptop blinked patiently, urging me to begin. Notes for the support group I volunteered with, reflections on betrayal and resilience. Yet my mind wandered back to the confrontation 3 nights ago in the Argentum and the flood of emotions that followed. When the certified mail confirmation pinged on my phone, I felt a surge of both relief and trepidation. Relief that I had spoken my truth, trepidation about their response, or worse, their silence. I knew this letter was not just words on paper, but an invitation for them to step into honesty or retreat further into denial. That afternoon, my grandmother called. "Did you rest well?" she asked, concern warming her voice. "As well as can be expected," I replied, stretching sore shoulders. "Thank you for checking in." "I spoke with Aunt Marisol and Uncle Victor," she said. "They're offering to connect you with their financial advisor, free of charge, to set up your new trust. And Ethan has been emailing me about potential apartment upgrades." I smiled at the thought of my rising circle of support. "It means so much, Grandma. I'm ready to move forward." She paused. "Your parents have mailed a response. They apologize and promise to meet in 2 days to finalize repayment details." I set my mug down carefully. "I appreciate their willingness to cooperate." "That's a start," she said gently. "Remember that rebuilding trust takes time." I nodded, even though she couldn't see me. "I know." Over the next 48 hours, I prepared for the meeting. I gathered copies of my bank statements, itemized the student loan balances, and drafted a clear agenda. Repayment schedule, escrow account setup, documentation transparency, and agreed upon counseling sessions. My grandmother offered to attend, but I insisted on handling this meeting solo, determined to assert my autonomy. The agreed-upon location was a quiet conference room at my grandmother's insurance office in downtown Tacoma. High ceilings, mahogany furniture, and leather chairs made it feel formal, yet not as intimidating as the Argentum had been. The receptionist led me to the room where my parents already waited. My mother sat with red-rimmed eyes, clutching a manila folder. My father stood awkwardly, glancing at his watch. I took a breath, opening my own folder. "Thank you for meeting," I began, voice steady. "I'm here to ensure we finalize the financial aspects as promised. After that, we can discuss next steps in any ongoing relationship." My mother's lips quivered. "We're sorry, Helena. We never meant for it to hurt you so deeply." "I understand intentions can go astray, Pemesun," I replied, "but I need clarity." "First, the total amount owed is $132,000, which covers all transfers plus 6% annual interest as per a standard restitution calculation." I slid the figure sheet across the table. "Is that accurate?" My father exhaled. "Yes." He opened the manila folder to reveal a cashier's check for $45,000, the exact balance of my student loans, and a signed promissory note for the remaining $87,000 payable over 12 months. That's a solid start, I acknowledged. I'll provide the escrow account details. These funds will be deposited directly there. I handed them the bank information. Next, I'd like copies of your bank statements showing the initial transfers and the loans you claimed in my name. My mother hesitated, then extended the folder. Everything we could find is here. She handed over printouts and photocopies. I scanned them quickly, transaction dates, amounts, bank references. Thank you. Finally, I request that we agree to 3 family counseling sessions over the next 3 months, with Dr. Rivera present to address the deeper emotional wounds. My father nodded slowly. We agree. I let the silence settle, satisfied that each point had been addressed. Excellent. I'll share a detailed summary within 24 hours, and I expect all funds in escrow within 5 business days. I rose from my chair. Is there anything else? My mother's voice trembled. We love you and hope we can rebuild trust, however long it takes. I met her gaze. Thank you for accompanying me here. I believe transparency is a good first step. With that, I left the room, the weight of confrontation lifting. In the reception area, my grandmother waited, her smile warm though tinged with concern. She reached for my hand. You did well. I leaned into her embrace. I feel stronger than I have in years. That evening, standing on my apartment balcony, I watched the sun set over Lake Union. The water glowed amber as stingrays of twilight swept across the sky. My phone buzzed with a message from Ethan. Congrats on today's progress. Dinner at your place tomorrow, my treat. I texted back. Would love that. Thank you. Inside, I set aside the file of meeting documents and opened my laptop. The volunteer support group's monthly newsletter awaited my reflections. I began typing, finding strength in truth. This month's theme, breaking the silence. Many of us have held secrets, family traumas, hidden debts, emotional betrayals. My own journey led me to discover that what we hide can corrode our sense of self and trust in others. The moment I demanded transparency, words flowed from my fingertips, articulating lessons on boundaries, accountability, and the healing power of honesty. I paused to insert the metaphor of the lake's shifting light, symbolizing how truth can reveal hidden depths and illuminate our path forward. Later, as the room darkened and only the glow of my screen remained, I reflected on the transformation underway. The fractured bonds with my parents were mending, too slowly perhaps, but with deliberate intention. I had reclaimed autonomy over my finances and my story. My relationships with my grandmother, brother, and extended family deepened. And my career, my true passion, stood on firmer ground, bolstered by the confidence that I could face adversity with integrity. Tomorrow, Ethan would bring takeout and laughter. Next week, the escrow account would activate. In 1 month, my parents' repayments would complete. Each milestone marked progress, but the journey extended beyond money. It was about rebuilding trust in others, and most importantly, in myself. I closed the laptop and stood in the soft lamplight of my living room. For the first time since graduation night, I felt a genuine sense of peace. The lake outside whispered of continuity. The city lights promised possibility. And I, Helena Turner, stood ready to chart the next chapter, one defined not by hidden burdens, but by the courage to embrace truth and forge a life of authenticity. A crisp autumn morning greeted me as I stepped onto the busy streets of downtown Tacoma. Auburn leaves drifted like confetti across sidewalks, and the tang of sea salt mingled with the scent of roasted coffee from a nearby cafe. Today marked my first family therapy session, one I had agreed to after much deliberation, determined to confront the emotional wounds alongside the financial ones. I navigated to Dr. Elena Rivera's office, a converted craftsman bungalow with ivy-clad walls and warm amber lighting inside. The waiting room felt welcoming. Plush chairs, soft instrumental music, and framed motivational quotes. I settled into a seat, clutching my tote bag that contained a neatly organized folder. Meeting summaries, bank statements, my letter to my parents, and notes on topics I wanted to address: trust, boundaries, resentment, and perhaps most crucially, the possibility of healing. Moments later, my parents arrived. Clara's eyes were red-rimmed, and Thomas looked anxious, drawing in deep breaths as he approached. My grandmother sat beside me on a small couch, her presence a quiet reassurance. Aunt Marisol lingered at the threshold with Uncle Victor, but Dr. Rivera invited them in as well. We filled every seat in the cozy living room, a circle more formal than any family gathering I'd known. Dr. Rivera opened the session with a gentle smile. Thank you all for being here. Today, our goal is to create a safe space to express feelings, listen, and understand one another. Let's start by each sharing how you feel about the events of the past month. My parents exchanged a glance. My mother bit her lip, then nodded to my father, who spoke first. I feel shame, he admitted quietly. Shame for betraying Helena's trust, for putting my own desires above what I promised. Clara's voice trembled. I feel guilt. I thought I was protecting our family, but I ended up harming the person I love most. She wiped her eyes. My grandmother leaned forward. I feel sorrow, she said. Sorrow that I trusted my own children to do right by their daughter, and sorrow at the pain Helena endured. Aunt Marisol and Uncle Victor offered brief sentiments of regret and support. Then Dr. Rivera turned to me. Helena? I inhaled deeply, recalling every lonely night, every frantic budget calculation, every pang of embarrassment at refusing invitations or skipping meals. I feel betrayed, I confessed, voice wavering. Betrayed by the people I loved and trusted most. I feel anger that so many years of my life were stolen. And I feel fear, fear that if I let my guard down, I could be hurt again. Silence followed. The weight of my words hung in the room like mist. Dr. Rivera nodded empathetically. These feelings are valid. Healing begins with acknowledging them. Clara, Thomas, how do you respond to Helena's feelings of betrayal and fear? My mother's shoulders shook. She reached for my hand. I'm so sorry, Helena. If I could take away your pain, I would. I understand if you can't forgive me yet. My father's eyes glistened. I want to earn back your trust, even if it takes years. I'll do whatever it takes to show you I'm committed to honesty and your well-being. I felt tears blur my vision. Part of me wanted to lash out again, to demand retribution. But as I looked at their faces, marked by genuine remorse, I sensed a fragile opening. Words aren't enough, I said quietly. I need consistent actions. I need you to follow through on the repayment plan and be transparent about everything, not just with me, but with yourselves, Doctor. Rivera guided the conversation toward concrete steps: monthly check-ins on the escrow account, joint financial planning sessions where Helena would lead, and separate appointments for my parents to work on underlying spending behaviors and communication patterns. We also agreed to individual therapy support for each of us, recognizing that my parents carried their own traumas and patterns they needed to unpack. Over the next 90 minutes, we navigated turbulent currents of emotion, Clara confessing how a childhood scarcity mindset drove her to hoard resources, Thomas revealing insecurities about providing for his family, and me articulating the deep scars of self-doubt and the struggle to trust my own judgment. My grandmother and aunt offered insights as extended family anchors, emphasizing the importance of communal support and accountability. By the end of the session, a semblance of calm settled. Dr. Rivera summarized our action plan. 1. Escrow review. Monthly statements to be sent directly to Helena and verified in the next session. 2. Financial co-leadership. Helena will lead a budgeting workshop for the family to review ongoing expenses and savings goals. 3. Therapy. Commitments. Weekly individual sessions for each family member, plus bi-weekly group sessions for 3 months. 4. Communication practice. Daily check-ins. Brief 15-minute conversations where each person shares one gratitude and one concern. We all agreed, signing a simple document to formalize our commitments and ensure mutual accountability. As we stood to leave, Dr. Rivera offered words of encouragement. Trust is like glass. It can break, but with careful attention, it can be repaired. The cracks may remain visible, but they can become a testament to resilience. Outside, the Pacific Northwest chill bit at my cheeks. My grandmother wrapped a handkerchief around my shoulders. "You were brave today," she whispered. "This is progress." My parents approached me cautiously. Clara enveloped me in a hug that felt tentative, yet hopeful. Thomas offered a gentle pat on the back. "Thank you for giving us this chance," he said softly. I exhaled, the breeze carrying away a fraction of the heaviness in my chest. "Let's keep moving forward," I replied. Over the following weeks, I immersed myself in the routines we'd established. Each morning, I logged into the online escrow portal, tracking the repayments as they arrived. I found a sense of empowerment in monitoring the numbers that once had controlled my life in secret. After work, I hosted my parents for a budgeting session in my apartment. I set out colored markers and chart paper, guiding them through projections, emergency funds, retirement contributions, discretionary spending. Their initial hesitation gave way to genuine interest as they asked questions and took notes. I realized that financial education was not just for me, but for the whole family's future well-being. My individual therapy sessions delved into the lingering effects of financial trauma. I confronted patterns of self-blame, perfectionism, and hyper-independence that had taken root during my college years. Dr. Rivera helped me develop self-compassion practices, writing affirmations, journaling about achievements outside monetary success, and pausing to acknowledge small wins. On Sunday afternoons, I joined Grandma Agnes and Aunt Marisol for a knitting circle in her sunny dining room. As we worked on scarves and shawls, conversations turned from yarn to life lessons, setting boundaries, embracing vulnerability, and the healing power of community. My grandmother shared stories of her own childhood hardships, underscoring that resilience often blossoms from adversity. At the 6-week mark, we reconvened with Dr. Rivera for our bi-weekly family session. The tension that once crackled like static had mellowed into cautious warmth. We celebrated milestones: the escrow account fully funded for 2 months, honest dialogues uninterrupted by old defensiveness, and a newfound willingness to share both gratitude and concerns. When the session concluded, my mother turned to me with moist eyes. "Thank you for your leadership, your patience, and your forgiveness in progress." I smiled, feeling the room radiate the possibility of genuine healing. "Thank you for listening and showing up," I replied. Stepping into the fading daylight, I marveled at how far we had come from that fateful dinner at the Argentum. The road ahead still held challenges, but for the first time, I believed our family could navigate them together, equipped not by blind loyalty, but by the hard-won lessons of truth, accountability, and love reborn on honest foundations. Winter arrived, cloaking Seattle in mist and rain, but a quiet warmth radiated through the walls of my new apartment as I prepared for another family gathering, this time a holiday dinner hosted by my grandmother. The soft glow of fairy lights twined around her mantelpiece, and the scent of pine from a modest but elegant Christmas tree mingled with the aroma of roasting chestnuts and spiced cider. For the first time since my graduation debacle, the prospect of a family celebration felt safe rather than fraught. My grandmother, Agnes Monroe, greeted me at the door with a hug that carried years of unwavering support. "Welcome home, dear," she said, her voice thick with emotion. She ushered me inside, where plates of homemade turkey, mashed potatoes, and roasted vegetables waited on a long oak dining table. Candles flickered in silver holders, and crystal glasses sparkled. Seated around the table were the people who had become my pillars. Grandma Agnes at the head, Aunt Marisol and Uncle Victor to her right, my brother Ethan across from me, and my parents, Clara and Tomas, seated to my left. Their faces reflected anticipation and a hint of nervousness. I sensed they saw this as another barometer of our progress. I took a deep breath, recalling our family therapy commitments, to share one gratitude and one concern each night. Tonight I would honor that promise. Grandma clinked her glass gently. "Before we begin, let us each share one thing we're grateful for and one hope for the coming year," she said, smiling. Her eyes met mine, encouraging honesty. I lifted my glass of cider. I'm grateful for the chance to rebuild our family on truthful ground, and I hope that we continue to grow in trust and understanding. I set my glass down and felt a chorus of supportive nods. Ethan spoke next. "I am grateful for you, Helena, for showing me what true resilience looks like. My hope is that we all find forgiveness in our hearts." He grinned sheepishly, drawing warm smiles. Aunt Marisol cleared her throat. "I'm grateful for Grandma's wisdom that brought us together, and I hope to strengthen our family bonds through more open communication." Uncle Victor echoed similar sentiments. When it was my mother's turn, her voice trembled. "I'm grateful for my daughter's strength. You've taught me humility. I hope to become a parent worthy of your forgiveness." She met my gaze, and I saw genuine remorse mingled with determination. Thomas spoke with quiet conviction. "I'm grateful for the opportunity to correct my mistakes, and I hope to be someone you can trust unconditionally." The mood in the room shifted, no longer disciplined, but hopeful. We began to pass dishes around, the conversation warming with laughter as we remembered childhood holiday traditions. The annual caroling by the community choir, the snowball fight my parents always pretended to lose, and Grandma's infamous gingerbread cookies. As we tucked into our feast, Grandma leaned toward me. "How are you settling in at work?" she asked. I smiled. "Very well. My team at Evergreen Innovations just launched a pilot project for biodegradable packaging in 2 local breweries." It's exactly the kind of impact I dreamed of making. I paused. And I've started mentoring a freshman at my alma mater, helping her navigate scholarships and part-time work so she won't repeat my mistakes. Their expressions lit up. That's wonderful, Clara said, reaching for the cranberry sauce. It feels good to see you thrive. I nodded, spooning mashed potatoes onto my plate. It does. I've learned that sharing my experience can turn pain into purpose. The conversation turned to lighter topics: Ethan's campus antics, Aunt Marisol's upcoming gallery exhibit, and Uncle Victor's plans for a family trip to Mount Rainier next summer. As laughter filled the room, I felt a sense of belonging I hadn't known in months. After dinner, we gathered around the fireplace for dessert: Grandma's gingerbread and hot cocoa. My parents exchanged meaningful glances and Clara cleared her throat. There's something else we'd like to share, she said, voice soft but steady. They reached into a small bag and pulled out 2 envelopes. These are for you, Helena. I felt my heart flutter. What are they? I asked, curious. Thomas offered the first envelope. This is a check to cover any remaining counseling expenses for all of us, plus a year's worth of sessions to continue our progress. And this, he handed me the second envelope. This is from Clara and me, for your personal savings, a gesture to show our commitment to your future, without any control over it. I stared at the envelopes, overwhelmed by their thoughtfulness and the symbolic weight they carried. Carefully, I opened the first. The check matched the amount we'd discussed, with room to spare. The second contained a sum less than Grandma's gifts, but meant purely for my own use. It wasn't about the money. It was about their willingness to relinquish power and trust me fully. Tears brimmed in my eyes as I met their gazes. Thank you, I whispered, voice thick with emotion. This means more than you know. My grandmother dabbed at her own eyes. Love guided by trust is the greatest gift of all, she said gently. Standing there, enveloped by the warmth of reclaimed family bonds and the glow of holiday lights, I realized that our journey was far from over, but this moment marked a profound milestone. We had moved from deception to dialogue, from brokenness to tentative restoration. And as I wrapped my arms around my mother and father, I felt the power of forgiveness, not as a single act, but as a series of choices made each day to honor truth, compassion, and each other. That night, as I returned home to my own apartment, now filled with thrifted treasures and the laughter of recent gatherings, I felt a quiet certainty. The story of Helena Turner would no longer be one of hidden sorrow, but of honest transformation. Written day by day in acts of courage, trust, and unwavering love. The following spring brought not only cherry blossoms to the streets of Seattle, but also a renewed sense of purpose to my life. I woke one Saturday morning to the distant rumble of light rail trains and the soft chirping of robins outside my window. Sunlight streamed through the blinds, painting geometric patterns on the hardwood floor. I stretched, feeling a rare lightness in my chest, a far cry from the anxiety that had plagued me just months earlier. I had a full day ahead, a morning volunteer shift at the university's career center, an afternoon meeting with my mentor at Evergreen Innovations, and in the evening, a community workshop I'd organized on financial literacy for young adults. The workshop was a passion project born from my own struggles, an opportunity to share the hard-earned lessons of setting boundaries, managing expenses, and seeking help before hitting rock bottom. After a quick breakfast of avocado toast and a mug of jasmine tea, I grabbed my tote bag, stocked with handouts, markers, and a whiteboard eraser, and headed out. On the walk to the light rail station, I reflected on how drastically my relationships had evolved. My parents had faithfully deposited each installment into the escrow account. My grandmother monitored the statements, and our monthly therapy sessions continued, each one chipping away at the residual distrust. At the Campus Career Center, I greeted students with genuine enthusiasm. One by one, they approached my table, asking about resume tips, networking strategies, and how to balance job applications with coursework. When a freshman sheepishly admitted she was about to work 30 hours a week to cover rent, I gently encouraged her to explore grants, work-study positions, and on-campus jobs that offered more flexibility. I shared my story, how working 3 jobs had nearly broken me, and how resources I didn't even know existed could have made all the difference. As I packed up, the director, Dr. Simmons, approached. "Helena, your workshop tomorrow evening is full, again," she said, handing me a printed roster. "You have 60 sign-ups and a waiting list of 15 students." I smiled, heart swelling. "That's incredible. Thank you for the support." She nodded. "Your authenticity resonates. Students appreciate someone who's been in their shoes." Leaving campus, I boarded the light rail toward Pioneer Square. From the window, I watched the cityscape blur, skyscrapers giving way to old brick facades and cobblestone streets. At Evergreen Innovations, I met with my mentor, Marcus Lee, in a bright, open-plan office overlooking Elliott Bay. We discussed the pilot project's progress and strategies for scaling up sustainable packaging solutions. Marcus praised my leadership in securing a partnership with 2 regional breweries and encouraged me to present our results at the upcoming Green Tech Summit in Portland. "Your story will be compelling," he said. Combining data with personal narrative is a powerful tool. I nodded, already drafting ideas for a slide deck that wove together environmental impact metrics and anecdotes about how financial hardship had shaped my values. After the meeting, I slid into the back seat of a rideshare, heading to my workshop venue, a community center in the Capitol Hill neighborhood. As I stepped out onto Broadway, cherry blossom petals drifted like pink snow around me. The community center's windows sparkled in the afternoon sun, and through them I could see rows of folding chairs arranged theater style. Inside, I set up a small table with my materials and tested the projector. By 6 o'clock, the room was already buzzing with attendees, students, young professionals, and even a few parents curious to learn budgeting tips. I took a steadying breath, recalling the first time I had stood before a crowd to confront my parents' misdeeds in a high-end restaurant. This felt worlds apart. Here, the atmosphere was charged with hope rather than tension. I stepped to the front and introduced myself. "Good evening, everyone. My name is Helena Turner. 4 years ago, I graduated from college buried under $45,000 of loans, working 3 jobs just to survive." I was proud of my degree, but my story took a turn when I discovered that a grandparent had been sending thousands of dollars a month for my education, funds my parents had diverted for their own use. That revelation shattered my trust and left me questioning everything about family, money, and self-worth. A hush fell over the room as I spoke. I saw nods of recognition, students who knew the weight of hidden loans, the fear of financial ruin. I continued. "Today, I stand here debt-free because my family and I confronted the truth, held each other accountable, and rebuilt our relationships on honesty. I want to share with you the tools I learned along the way to help you avoid similar pitfalls." For the next 90 minutes, I guided them through practical exercises, crafting a bare-bones budget, identifying emergency fund strategies, understanding interest rates, and discussing when to seek professional help. We role-played conversations about asking for financial aid from family members, setting clear boundaries, and researching scholarship opportunities. I offered templates for expense trackers and shared a list of local resources, non-profit programs, campus offices, and financial counseling services. Throughout the session, participants asked thoughtful questions. One junior engineering student, Marcus, no relation to my mentor, raised his hand. What if your family refuses to talk about money or admits there's nothing they can do? How do you move forward? I paused, remembering the fear and frustration I'd felt that fateful night at the Argentum. You find alternative support, I answered. Look for aunt, uncle, or grandparent who might help, or lean on academic advisors, non-profit organizations, and peer support groups. If direct family resources aren't available or trustworthy, build your own network of mentors and allies. And always document your finances. Knowledge is power. When the workshop concluded, attendees lingered to express gratitude and swap contact information. Several asked if I would join a mentorship program. Others wanted to co-found a student finance collective. I left with my tote bag full of returned materials and my heart full of purpose. That evening, as cherry blossoms continued to fall outside my apartment window, I reflected on how far I'd come. The betrayal that once threatened to define me had become the springboard to empower others. My parents' restitution continued steadily, but my focus had shifted from the past to the future, building a life defined by integrity, advocacy, and community impact. I opened the window, the cool breeze carrying the aroma of rain-soaked petals. I raised my phone and took a quick video to share on my blog. Tonight's workshop reminded me that vulnerability and truth can create real change. Financial hardship doesn't have to be a silent struggle. There are resources, allies, and strategies to help you succeed. Let's continue the conversation. I posted it with a flourish, then closed my laptop. As I lay in bed, the city lights reflected on the ceiling, I murmured a quiet thank you to my grandmother, to the family who had chosen to rebuild, and to myself for seizing the courage to demand truth. The cherry blossoms outside promised renewal. Inside me, a deeper transformation had taken root, one that would continue to grow with each act of honesty and compassion. Spring ripened into early summer, and Seattle's skies cleared to reveal soft, cerulean afternoons. I woke on a Saturday to birdsong and sunlight dancing across my bedroom walls. Today marked an important milestone. I would present at the Green Tech Summit in Portland, my first major speaking engagement outside of Seattle. Months ago, the mere thought of public speaking would have tightened a knot of fear in my chest. Now, the knowledge that I was sharing both data and personal truth filled me with purpose. After a quick breakfast of almond butter on whole grain toast and a green smoothie, I gathered my presentation materials, USB drive, clicker, and a printed copy of my slide deck. Each slide combined environmental impact metrics with snapshots of my journey, notes on loan repayments, milestones in family reconciliation, and before-after photos of the escrow account balance. I had woven in images of cherry blossoms and the Mercer Island Park, where I once studied in solitude, reminding my audience that truth and nature both flourish when nurtured. My grandmother drove me to the King Street station. En route, she squeezed my hand. "You're going to inspire people today," she said, her eyes bright. I smiled, gratitude warming me. "Thank you for everything," I replied. "I wouldn't be here without you." At the Amtrak Cascades platform, I boarded the train bound for Portland. Seated by the window, I watched the Puget Sound shoreline slip away, then lush forests and rolling farmland unfurl into the Willamette Valley. I reviewed my notes, practiced key transitions, and visualized the moment I would step onto the conference stage. Arriving in Portland's Union Station, I felt a flutter of nerves, quickly quelled by the buzz of fellow attendees. I navigated to the conference center, a sleek glass building reflecting summer sunlight, and checked in at the registration desk. A volunteer handed me a lanyard and directed me to the Green Pavilion, where my session would begin in an hour. Backstage, I encountered other presenters, engineers, activists, policy experts, each with their own data-rich presentations. I hesitated for a moment, doubting whether my story belonged among their technical expertise. Then I reminded myself, numbers alone don't move hearts, and personal narratives bridge the gap between data and action. I stepped onto the raised platform, scanning the room of 200 seats. My heart hammered, but I straightened my posture and activated the microphone. "Good morning, everyone," I began, voice steady. "I'm Dr. Helena Turner, or at least I will be after next month, when my startup's board approves the official title. But today, I'm here as someone who learned that sustainability isn't just about the planet. It's about equitable access to education, honest communication, and financial well-being." A few heads tilted, intrigued by the unexpected link between environmentalism and personal finance. I clicked to the next slide, a bar chart illustrating waste reduction metrics from our brewery pilot, juxtaposed with a line graph showing escrow balances rising steadily. In 2 pilot breweries, I explained, we reduced single-use plastic waste by 75% over 6 months. Meanwhile, behind the scenes, I was on my own pilot journey, reducing the waste of my own potential through hidden family finances that nearly derailed my education. My audience leaned in as I recounted the core of my story. This $3,000 monthly transfers from my grandmother, the diversion by my parents, and the discovery that liberated me from $45,000 in loans. I highlighted parallels. Just as opaque supply chains can conceal environmental harm, opaque family finances can conceal personal harm. Transparency in both realms is key to accountability and progress. I steered into actionable insights, principles of environmental transparency, financial transparency, and community accountability. I outlined a modular framework. 1. Map your flows. Trace material flows in operations or money flows in your personal ecosystem. 2. Identify leaks. Pinpoint areas where resources, be it recyclable materials or financial support, are siphoned off or underutilized. 3. Engage stakeholders. Bring all parties into the conversation, suppliers, family members, advisors, to co-create solutions. 4. Implement restitution mechanisms. Establish escrow accounts, supply chain audits, or restitution funds to ensure resources reach their intended purpose. 5. Monitor and report, regularly review metrics, waste diversion rates, or loan repayment progress, and report transparently to build trust. As I elaborated on each step, I scanned the room. I saw nods of recognition from resilience experts, policymakers scribbling notes, and young activists scribbling down my website to download the workshop handouts. I concluded, when I demanded transparency in my own life, I reclaimed not only financial stability but also trust, purpose, and the capacity to advocate for systemic change. By applying these principles to environmental initiatives, we can ensure our efforts are both effective and equitable. Thank you. The room broke into enthusiastic applause. A few attendees approached afterward, thanking me for the unique blend of data and personal narrative. One representative from a regional NGO asked about collaborating on a financial literacy program for community-based environmental projects. Another environmental engineer invited me to co-author a white paper on transparency frameworks. I felt exhilarated, a blend of relief and excitement for the opportunities unfolding. Before boarding the evening train back to Seattle, I walked across the Willamette River pedestrian bridge, the city skyline alight. I reflected on the parallels between my personal and professional journeys. Both had required the courage to expose hidden truths, the resilience to demand accountability, and the vision to build frameworks where equity and integrity guide progress. As the sun dipped toward the horizon, painting the river in molten gold, I sent a quick message to my grandmother. Presentation went amazingly. So grateful to share our story. Moments later, her reply appeared. You shone bright, my dear. Proud always. I closed my phone, inhaled deeply, and carried that warmth with me onto the train. The tracks hummed beneath me, echoing the steady pulse of a life reclaimed, 1 mile at a time, one truth at a time. By the time I rolled into my apartment shortly after midnight, the city lights of downtown Seattle shimmered like distant constellations. I dropped my bag by the door and sank onto the couch, the soft hum of my refrigerator providing a gentle backdrop to my thoughts. The Green Tech Summit had exceeded my wildest expectations. Invitations to collaborate, enthusiastic feedback, and even press coverage in a local sustainability journal. Yet amid the professional triumphs, I realized the personal journey still rippled beneath the surface. The next morning, I awoke to a stack of unanswered emails, some from colleagues at Evergreen Innovations, others from aspiring students eager to volunteer. But my phone's most urgent notification came from my grandmother. Your parents called. They'd like to meet this weekend, if you feel ready. I traced my finger across the screen, feeling a familiar flutter of apprehension. Our last family therapy session had gone well. My parents had demonstrated accountability, and our weekly check-ins had provided small but meaningful moments of reconnection. Yet meeting them outside structured therapy or financial negotiations felt like stepping onto thin ice. I texted back, let's meet at the cafe near my apartment, Saturday at 11. Within minutes, Grandma replied, I'll be there too, for support. Saturday dawned overcast and cool, with a gentle drizzle misting the sidewalks. I arranged a small table by the window at Blue Heron Cafe, my sanctuary during tense weeks, where I often nudged open heavy curtains to let in the grey light and ordered chamomile tea. Grandma arrived first, her umbrella dripping as she settled into the chair opposite mine. She smiled, but I sensed the tension behind her eyes. My parents entered moments later, exchanging tentative smiles. Clara's hands were folded in her lap. Thomas's shoulders were squared, determination mixed with nervousness in his posture. Grandma rose to greet them, offering warm embraces before directing us all back to our seats. Thank you for meeting, I began, voice steady though my pulse drummed in my ears. I thought it might be helpful to talk outside the therapy room, just as family, with honesty. Thomas nodded. We appreciate this opportunity, Helena. Clara swallowed. We want to share something beyond finances, something personal. I leaned forward. I'm listening. For a moment, They exchanged glances. Clara took a breath. During our last therapy session, you encouraged us to share not just our regrets, but our hopes for the future. We've reflected on what that means, both as parents and as people. Thomas continued, eyes on mine. Clara and I have decided to make changes, not just repaying what we owe, but transforming our lives so we don't repeat past mistakes. Curiosity and caution warred within me. What kind of changes? Clara's lips quivered. We're downsizing our home in Bellevue. We realized our spending was tied to keeping up appearances, not genuine happiness. We want to redirect our savings toward meaningful goals, supporting your career initiatives, funding community programs, and investing in our own growth. I blinked, absorbing the weight of her words. My childhood home, a 3,000 square foot craftsman with immaculate landscaping, had been a symbol of stability and pride. Now, they aim to trade it for a smaller, more manageable townhouse, freeing up funds and time. Thomas added, we've also enrolled in financial counseling courses and a volunteer program at the Tacoma Homeless Shelter. We want to give back, to learn humility and empathy firsthand. My grandmother's eyes misted as she reached across to squeeze my hand. They've been through the same therapy regimen you have, and they're committed to real action. I drew in a slow breath. I'm proud of you for making these commitments, I said quietly. But I need to know, what will our relationship look like moving forward? Clara glanced at Thomas before speaking. We hope to rebuild trust step by step. We'd like to join you at your next community workshop, to volunteer alongside you and show up consistently. No grand gestures, just regular support. I considered their sincerity. In the months since graduation, I'd learned that slow consistency often mattered more than big declarations. The escrow account was 10 installments in. My parents had attended every therapy session. They'd even surprised me by signing up for my volunteer shifts at the career center. Each act, however small, had built a fragile bridge. A shy smile crossed my face. I'd appreciate that, I said. I'd like to see you in that environment, collaborating rather than distancing. Thomas exhaled, relief softening his features. Thank you. The barista delivered our orders, 2 lavender lattes for my grandmother and me, and black coffee for my parents. The cafe's muted jazz played in the background as we sipped and settled into comfortable silence. Outside, rain pattered against the windows. After a moment, I spoke again. I've been thinking about hosting a panel on transparency, combining environmental and financial integrity. It would feature an environmental activist, a financial counselor, and my parents, if you're willing. Clara's eyes widened. On stage? I nodded. It would be a chance to share our journey holistically, acknowledging mistakes and showing how authenticity can transform relationships and communities. They exchanged looks, then Clara nodded. We'd be honored. The tension in the cafe dissolved into a warm glow of shared purpose. Grandma leaned back in her chair, a proud smile curving her lips. Outside, the rain eased into a light drizzle, and beams of afternoon sun broke through grey clouds, illuminating the street. As we rose to leave, I felt a lightness I hadn't known in years. The road ahead would have its challenges. Trust rebuilt can still fracture under unforeseen stress. But today, we had charted a new course, one defined by collective commitment to truth, accountability, and joint action. Walking home, I glanced at my grandmother and parents, each step echoing on the wet pavement. The city around us hummed with life, a reminder that we too were part of something larger. A community of relationships, systems, and stories interwoven by both shadow and light. And in that moment, I embraced the truth that the next chapter of my life and of my family's story would be written not in the silence of hidden debts, but in the shared footsteps of transparency and healing. Summer settled into Seattle with a gentle warmth, and the city buzzed with festivals, farmers' markets, and outdoor concerts. For me, however, the focus lay on an upcoming panel discussion I had conceptualized. Transparency in action, uniting environmental stewardship and financial integrity. It was scheduled for mid-July at the Greenwood Community Center, and it would bring together voices from multiple spheres: an environmental activist, a certified financial counselor, my parents, and myself. The weeks leading up to the event were a whirlwind of coordination. I worked closely with the community center's events coordinator, Marisol Jensen, to arrange seating, publicity, and technical support. Posters went up across the neighborhood, a sky blue backdrop displaying the panel's title in crisp white lettering, overlaid with icons of a leaf and a dollar sign connected by arrows. Social media campaigns invited local residents. Learn how honesty fuels both green initiatives and personal well-being. Behind the scenes, I met weekly with my panelists. First was Dr. Rafael Ortiz, a renowned environmental scientist whose research on urban wetlands had earned national acclaim. He and I met at a cafe near Green Lake, where we discussed how ecological transparency, open data on pollution levels and resource use, could be mirrored in personal finance transparency. His insights would anchor the environmental segment of the panel. Next, I convened with Lydia Chen, a certified financial counselor from the nonprofit Safe Harbor. In her modest Ballard office, she outlined best practices for budget audits, escrow mechanisms, and debt restitution, tools I had lived through personally. Lydia agreed to share case studies alongside my story, reinforcing the message that financial integrity is both a moral and practical necessity. And then there were my parents. Clara and Tomas arrived at my apartment one evening, bearing notebooks and earnest expressions. We practiced their part of the discussion, sharing their experience of confronting their own spending patterns, enrolling in financial counseling, and volunteering at the Tacoma shelter. We discussed how to speak authentically about their remorse, their strategies for change, and their vision for continued growth without overshadowing the central message of collective accountability. During one practice session, Clara paused, voice wavering. "I don't want to come across as defensive," she admitted. "I want to show genuine contrition and hope." I placed a hand on her arm. "Speak from the heart. Acknowledge the harm, then pivot to what you're doing now to build trust. That honesty will resonate." Thomas nodded. "We're ready." On the day of the panel, the Greenwood Community Center's auditorium hummed with anticipation. Rows of chairs faced a low stage set with 4 stools and a small table holding water carafes. A banner overhead proclaimed the event's theme. I parked near my apartment and walked over with my grandmother, whose quiet pride radiated with each step. Ethan arrived soon after, offering moral support and filming the preparations on his phone. Marisol greeted us at the door. "We've got a full house, nearly 120 people reserved, plus walk-ins." I inhaled deeply. "Thank you. Let's make it meaningful." Backstage, I sensed the familiar flutter of nerves. The panelists gathered. Dr. Ortiz reviewed his notes. Lydia adjusted her microphone, and my parents exchanged a reassuring glance. I joined them, leaning in. "We've prepared. Let's trust one another." Moments later, Marisol signaled it was time. We took the stage to warm applause. I settled onto my stool and welcomed the audience. "Good evening," I began, voice clear. "Thank you for joining us for Transparency in Action. Tonight we explore how environmental and financial integrity intersect, and how each of us, in our personal and professional lives, can foster systems of honesty that benefit our communities and the planet." I introduced Ortiz, who opened with a description of Seattle's wetland restoration efforts. He shared maps and charts illustrating how open access data on water quality empowered citizens to advocate for healthier ecosystems. His expertise set the stage for understanding transparency as a catalyst for collective responsibility. Next, Lydia Chen described financial transparency frameworks, the importance of tracking income and expenses, setting up escrow accounts, and involving trusted third parties, lessons she had applied in cases ranging from small business owners to families recovering from debt. Her voice was calm and authoritative, and the audience nodded appreciatively at her practical tips. Then came my parents' turn. Clara spoke first, her voice steady. "I'm here not just as Helena's mother, but as someone who misused resources intended for another's education. Confronting that truth was terrifying. I felt shame and fear that I'd lost my daughter's trust irreparably." Her eyes glistened. "But acknowledging my mistakes was the first step toward change." Thomas continued, "I realized that hiding behind excuses for the family, temporary setbacks, only deepened the harm. I enrolled in spending awareness workshops, downsized our home, and committed to volunteering regularly. Each action is a reminder that integrity must guide both our words and our choices." A hush enveloped the room as they spoke. Then I shared my own perspective. When I demanded transparency at my graduation dinner, I reclaimed not only financial stability, but the freedom to pursue my passions without fear. That clarity fueled my work, whether launching sustainable packaging pilots or hosting community workshops. We concluded with an interactive Q&A. Attendees asked how to approach difficult family conversations, how to advocate for open environmental data, and how to balance accountability with forgiveness. We responded as a team. Dr. Ortiz nodded to Lydia when environmental activists asked about funding audits. Lydia deferred to my parents on questions of restitution and trust. My parents acknowledged my leadership, praising the courage it took to speak out. As the session wrapped, applause filled the hall. Many lingered to thank us personally. A young woman approached, tears in her eyes. "Your story gave me hope," she said, voice trembling. "I'm about to graduate, terrified of looming debt." I offered her resources. My parents offered understanding smiles. Backstage, my grandmother enveloped me in a hug. "You did it," she whispered. I exhaled, scanning the emptied stage. "We did it together." Walking home that night, the summer air warm with possibility, I marveled at how far we'd come, from hidden debts and broken trust to a shared story of accountability unfolding on a public stage. The journey ahead would continue, with its challenges and breakthroughs, but tonight proved that transparency, fostered by courage and guided by compassion, could unite disparate paths into a coherent narrative of transformation. By late summer, Seattle's rainy season was on the horizon, and the city's emerald greenery glistened under overcast skies. For me, the season carried significance beyond weather. It marked the 1-year anniversary of my graduation dinner, the night that upended my life and set me on the path to truth and transformation. As the leaves along Lake Union began their early shift toward autumn hues, I reflected on how far my family and I had come. That morning, I joined my grandmother, Aunt Marisol, and my brother Ethan for brunch at Shoreline Café, a cozy spot overlooking the Sound. We gathered at a window table, sunlight diffused through misty panes, and toasted with freshly brewed coffee. "To 1 year of rebuilding," Grandma Agnes said, her eyes bright, "and to all that lies ahead." I nodded, eyelashes misting. "To truth, no matter how painful." Ethan chimed in. "And to resilience." We laughed at the echo of our earlier gratitude rounds, then settled into catching up. I shared highlights from the past 12 months, the escrow account's successful completion, the family's steady therapy attendance, my promotion at Evergreen Innovations, and the community panel's positive impact. Grandma beamed as I recounted a recent thank you note from a scholarship recipient I'd mentored, another reminder that one person's hardships can transform into another's opportunity. After brunch, I walked home with Grandma. The mist had turned into a light drizzle, and we paused at a riverside park bench. She turned to me. "How do you feel, Helena?" I considered the question in the rhythmic patter of rain. "Grateful," I said, "but also cautious." Forgiveness doesn't erase the past, and trust isn't rebuilt overnight. I still carry scars, moments when the memory of that betrayal overwhelms me. Grandma nodded. "That's normal. Healing is a journey, not a destination. Remember how we planted those birch saplings behind your apartment? They needed time to root before they could withstand the wind." I smiled at the analogy. "We're like those trees, still growing stronger." That afternoon, I headed to my apartment to prepare for another workshop, this one on transparent leadership in social enterprises. I drafted slides linking lessons from my family's journey to BEST, practices in organizational governance, clear communication channels, stakeholder audits, and restitution protocols when mistakes occur. I had been invited by a local co-working hub, Collective Hive, eager to expand beyond personal finance into leadership consulting. As I set up my laptop and arranged notebooks across the dining table, my phone buzzed with a calendar reminder. Family check-in. Dinner, 6:30 p.m. My parents had insisted on hosting at their townhouse in Bellevue, marking another anniversary milestone. I paused, feeling a familiar undercurrent of nerves tempered by the calm confidence I'd cultivated. They'd upheld every commitment so far. I trusted they would again. At 6:30, I arrived at their doorstep carrying a bouquet of dahlias and a small homemade apple pie. Thomas greeted me at the door, voice warm. "Welcome, Helena." Clara appeared behind him, her smile genuine. The townhouse was warm and inviting, soft lighting, family photos on the mantel, and a simmering pot of stew on the stove, perennial symbols of home and care. I stepped into the dining room, where Grandma Agnes and Aunt Marisol already awaited around a candle-lit table. Ethan hovered with a tray of appetizers. We exchanged hugs, then took our seats as my parents served steaming bowls of vegetable barley stew and crusty bread. Before we began eating, my mother raised her glass. "To 1 year of truth and growth," she said, "and to the love that carried us through." I lifted my water glass, "to love that learns from its mistakes." We ate in comfortable silence for a few moments, savoring the hearty stew and the sense of reunion. Then my father spoke. "Helena, we wanted to share something we've been working on." He retrieved an envelope from the table and handed it to me. Inside was a framed document, a family transparency pact, detailing the principles we'd agreed upon, a commitment to honesty, monthly financial disclosures, joint volunteer commitments, and annual reviews of goals as a family unit. Each page bore all of our signatures in neat ink. Tears pricked my eyes. "You created this for us?" I whispered. Clara nodded, voice thick. "We wanted something tangible, a reminder of what we promised each other. Not just words, but a pact we all uphold." I placed the pact on the table reverently. "I'm honored. This means more than any restitution." Ethan grinned. "Can I get one with fewer words?" We laughed, the room warming with shared humor and affection. Later, we gathered for dessert, Grandma's famous apple pie with vanilla ice cream. As I took the first bite, memories of that celebratory meal at the Argentum flashed before me. The shock, the betrayal, the resolve. Now, here at this simple family dinner, I felt a quiet joy. The garden outside glistened with raindrops under porch lights, and I knew our roots were strong. After dishes were cleared, we lingered in the living room. I curled up on the couch next to my grandmother. My parents and Aunt Marisol sat on the love seat, Ethan in an armchair. In the gentle glow of a table lamp, Clara reached for my hand. "Thank you for giving us another chance," she said, voice soft. "I know I don't deserve it, but I promise to earn it every day." I squeezed her hand. "Just continue showing up as you have been." That's all I need. And in that shared moment, 5 people bound by both fracture and renewal, I sensed the profound power of transparency. It hadn't erased the pain, but it had created space for empathy, growth, and authentic connection. As autumn leaves gathered softly on the windowsill, I leaned back, content in the knowledge that our family's story would continue to unfold not in shadows, but in the light of collective honesty. Autumn deepened, and Seattle's hills glowed with amber and crimson. I woke early one Sunday to the scent of rain on fallen leaves. My grandmother's weekly knitting circle awaited me, a ritual that had become both solace and celebration of our journey. I dressed in a warm sweater and scarf, grabbed my umbrella, and headed to her cottage in Capitol Hill. Inside, the living room was a tapestry of colors, yarn skeins draped over chairs, half-finished scarves hanging from sofa arms, and the soft click of knitting needles echoing over tea-steamed conversations. Aunt Marisol and Ethan were already there. Marisol worked on a Fair Isle hat, and Ethan, in his new off-campus apartment, sipped coffee as he practiced coding on his laptop. My grandmother sat at her favorite armchair, a calm smile on her face. "Good morning, Helena," she greeted, rising to embrace me. "I made your favorite, chamomile with honey." I inhaled the fragrant steam. "Thank you, Grandma." We settled in a circle. The rhythmic needlework and gentle chatter felt like the steady heartbeat of our renewed connection. Conversation drifted from stitch patterns to holiday plans, but beneath the surface lay unspoken gratitude for how far we'd come. After a while, Grandma set aside her knitting and looked up. "I've been thinking about your next project," she said. "You mentioned helping nonprofits. Have you reached out to any local shelters for your financial literacy workshops?" I nodded. "Yes. I'm partnering with Community Bridge Shelter to host a workshop next month. They serve families facing eviction and youth aging out of foster care. It feels important to extend transparency tools to those most vulnerable." Marisol smiled. "That's wonderful, Helena. Your story resonates especially with those who felt powerless." Ethan chimed in. I've been helping set up the tech side, Zoom links, digital handouts, that sort of thing. He tapped his phone. We've got 20 sign-ups already. I felt a swell of pride. Thank you both. The knitting circle continued, but I sensed Grandma wanted more. She laid her needles down again. I also wanted to talk about something personal, your own sense of identity beyond these workshops and panels. I looked around the circle. What do you mean? She leaned forward. You've accomplished so much since that night at the Argentum. But have you carved out time just for yourself? Her question struck a chord. Between career demands, family engagements, and community commitments, my own self-care had fallen by the wayside. I realized I'd accepted every invitation, every speaking gig, every volunteer shift, often at the expense of quiet moments that once grounded me. That's a good point, I admitted. I have been so focused on helping others and rebuilding trust that I haven't paused to check in with myself. Marisol nodded. You deserve moments of stillness too, time to read, to create, to just be. My grandmother picked up her needles. Let's make a plan. Each week I'll reserve one afternoon just for you. We can walk in the arboretum, visit the library, or work on a personal project you've been putting off. I smiled, touched by her thoughtfulness. I'd like that. We spent the next hour knitting and sketching out ideas. I decided to revisit a passion I'd shelved during college, creative writing. I had half written a short story set in the Olympic Mountains, exploring themes of isolation and revelation, an echo of my own journey. With Grandma's encouragement, I vowed to dedicate Sunday afternoons to finishing that story. The following week, I arrived at Community Bridge Shelter early to set up for the financial literacy workshop. The shelter's multi-purpose room was lined with folding chairs and a projector screen. Volunteers arranged bottled water and printed workbooks on a long table. Families trickled in, parents clutching toddlers, young adults with backpacks, and elders seeking stability. I welcomed each attendee, offering name tags and friendly smiles. The room hummed with the quiet energy of people eager to learn life-changing skills. I began with introductions. I'm Helena Turner. 4 years ago, I graduated with $45,000 of loans because I didn't know a key source of support existed, I said, earning empathetic nods. I'm here today to share tools that helped me and can help you navigate financial challenges with clarity and confidence. Over the next 2 hours, we covered budgeting templates, emergency fund strategies, and approaches to negotiating payment plans. With lenders, I encouraged attendees to map their money flows, just as corporate leaders map resource flows, highlighting areas for intervention. I invited them to share personal goals, paying rent, saving for childcare, or affording job training courses, and guided them in setting realistic timelines. The session closed with a Q&A. A young mother named Jasmine asked how to handle family members who discouraged her from seeking help. I shared my own experience confronting parents and emphasized the importance of building alternative support networks, trusted friends, mentors, and nonprofit resources. As we packed up, several attendees approached me to express gratitude. Jasmine hugged me and said, "You've given me hope that I can take control of my finances and my life." Walking back to the bus stop, I reflected on the workshop's impact. Each person's determination reinforced the ripple effect of transparency and support. My own healing and my family's journey had become a beacon guiding others toward empowerment. That evening, I met my grandmother at the Arboretum's visitor center. We strolled through groves of Douglas fir and maples ablaze with autumn color. I shared the workshop's success and my renewed commitment to personal writing time. Grandma paused beneath a canopy of golden leaves. "You're flourishing, my dear," she said softly. "Your story, both yours and those you help write, matters." I smiled, breathing in the crisp forest air. "Thank you for reminding me that growth isn't just measured by accomplishments, but by balance and self-care." She linked her arm with mine. "Now let's find a quiet bench where you can open that notebook." As we walked deeper into the arboretum, I felt rooted and free, anchored by the truths I'd demanded and nourished by the love that had guided me through vulnerability and renewal. The path ahead would continue to wind through challenges, but now I carried both the tools and the quiet strength to navigate every bend. Winter's first chill arrived early in December, frosting the evergreens that framed my apartment building's entrance. Inside, my living room was warm and fragrant with cedar-scented candles, my holiday tradition. Tonight was the annual end-of-year community gathering I hosted for the students and families I'd worked with throughout the year. This event celebrated their progress and marked the completion of my latest workshop series on transparent leadership. I spent the afternoon arranging the space, folding chairs in a semicircle, a hot cocoa station with dairy-free options, and a wall of gratitude notes pinned to a corkboard. Each note bore a brief message of thanks or a personal milestone. I saved my first $200. I negotiated a lower rent, and I reclaimed my credit report. As I taped the last note, my grandmother arrived carrying a tray of her signature spiced cookies. "You're setting a beautiful stage," she said, placing the cookies by the cocoa. "Thank you," I replied. It felt right to honor everyone's hard work. A knock at the door signaled my parents' arrival. Clara stepped in with a box of decorations, twinkling string lights and hand-painted snowflakes. Thomas carried a portable speaker loaded with a festive playlist. We exchanged hugs and set to work, laughter easing any lingering formality. By 6 o'clock, the first guests filed in. Students who had completed my mentoring program, parents who attended the shelter workshops, and a few local nonprofit partners. I welcomed each person, guiding them to the semicircle of chairs or to the cocoa station. The atmosphere hummed with anticipation and camaraderie. When everyone had settled, I stood at the front beside the gratitude wall. "Welcome, everyone," I began, voice warm. "Tonight, we celebrate not just the holiday season, but the power of truth, accountability, and perseverance. Each of you has taken courageous steps toward financial well-being and personal growth. Let's reflect on what we've achieved together this year." I invited attendees to share brief reflections. One young woman, Marisol, spoke first. "I paid off my overdue phone bill and opened a savings account. I feel hopeful for the first time." Her classmates applauded, and she beamed. Next, a father named Carlos described negotiating a payment plan for his daughter's medical bills after a chronic illness diagnosis. Tears glistened in his eyes as he thanked the community for guidance and support. As the sharing continued, I noticed my parents watching intently, pride softening their features. After several voices, I closed the circle. "Thank you for your honesty. Now, please enjoy refreshments, mingle, and take a moment to add any new gratitude notes to our wall." The room buzzed with conversation, as children lined up for cookies and hot cocoa and adults gathered in small groups. I circulated, offering hugs and asking about their plans for the holidays. My grandmother and aunt led a corner conversation on winter knitting projects, while Ethan teamed up with students to create DIY holiday cards at a craft table. Amid the bustle, my parents approached. Clara handed me a folded card. "We wanted to contribute," she said. "Inside is a gift for—" I opened the card to find a voucher for a weekend retreat at a cabin in the Cascade Mountains, one night for me and my grandmother and another for my parents to join later, if I wished. The note read, "For rest, renewal, and continued honesty, love, Mom and Dad." My throat tightened. Thank you," I whispered, touched by their thoughtfulness and recognition of my need for self-care. Thomas nodded. "We wanted to support your own healing time." I smiled through tears. "This means more than you know." The evening wound down with carols softly playing. Families lingered to exchange contact information. Partners discussed co-hosting future workshops, and I felt a deep sense of community woven from shared truths. As the last guests departed, I turned to my grandmother. "I think this was our best event yet." She hugged me. "You've built something lasting here, Helena." My parents helped me pack up the decorations, and Ethan loaded the remaining cookies. By the time we finished, the city outside was silent under a blanket of frost. I paused at my front door, inhaling the crisp air, then looked back at my companions, the people who had witnessed my darkest revelations and celebrated my every step forward. "This year has been transformative," I said, voice steady. "I couldn't have done it without all of you." Clara squeezed my hand. "We've all grown together," Thomas added. "Here's to another year of honesty, growth, and community." We stood in the glow of the foyer light, a family and a community, bound not by perfection, but by a shared commitment to truth and compassion. As I closed the door behind us, I felt a gentle confidence settle in my heart. The path ahead might still wind through challenges, but the foundation we had built promised resilience, support, and the enduring power of transparent love. The new year arrived with a promise of fresh starts and continued growth. On January 2nd, I found myself back at my writing desk, the same one where I'd first drafted my story set in the Olympic Mountains. The manuscript had sat untouched for months as I devoted time to family healing, community workshops, and career milestones. Now, with the retreat voucher burning a hole in my calendar and the holiday gathering behind us, I felt the pull to return to that personal project. I poured myself a mug of chamomile tea, sat down, and opened the draft. The story's protagonist, a naturalist named Maren, embarked on a solo trek to investigate strange lights over an alpine lake, an allegory for my own journey through shadows and revelations. As I reread the opening passages, I felt the familiar thrill of discovering new layers in my own narrative. A knock at the door interrupted my thoughts. It was my grandmother, bundled in a wool coat, her silver hair peeking from beneath a knitted cap. She held 2 steaming travel mugs. "Ready for our retreat?" she asked with a smile that crinkled the corners of her eyes. I nodded, standing to hug her. "Absolutely." We packed the car with our overnight bags and drove east toward the Cascades. The highways were flanked by snow-dusted evergreens, mountain peaks rising in the distance like silent sentinels. Grandma and I chatted about knitting patterns and family plans, but beneath the light conversation lay a shared anticipation, time away from daily routines to reflect, create, and simply be. At the cabin, a rustic A-frame nestled beside a frozen creek, we unloaded our things. The interior was cozy, pine-paneled walls, a stone fireplace, and large windows framing the winter landscape. We lit the fire and settled in with our mugs, the crackle of flames punctuating the quiet hush of the woods. That evening, after a simple dinner of soup and fresh-baked bread, I opened my laptop to the unfinished story. Grandma perched on a cushioned bench beside me, her knitting needles clicking softly. I read aloud the next section I'd drafted, Maren's discovery of submerged letters in the lake's icy depths, uncovering hidden truths long buried under layers of snow and stone. "Keep going," Grandma encouraged. "I want to see how she finds her way forward." Her support filled me with warmth. Over the next few hours, I wove new scenes. Maren's confrontation with the person who'd concealed the letters, the emotional reckoning beneath northern lights, and the dawn, when the lake's surface, now thawed, reflected an unmasked sky. My words flowed guided by the parallels of my own life, betrayal and restitution, loss and renewal. When I paused, I realized I had written more in that single evening than in the previous 6 months. I saved the document and closed the laptop, leaning back to breathe in the cedar-scented air. Grandma reached over, placing her hand on mine. "You've captured your truth," she said. "Just as you've lived it." The next morning, we awoke to fresh snowfall blanketing the creek's edge. Instead of writing, we wrapped ourselves in blankets and stepped outside. Our boots crunched in the snow as we wandered along a footpath, the world hushed and luminously white. I breathed deeply, feeling clarity settle in my mind, like the snowfall itself, each flake covering the scars of the past, creating a quiet canvas for new growth. Back at the cabin, I scribbled by hand in a leather-bound journal. Reflections on the retreat, gratitude for the journey, and intentions for the year ahead. I wrote about continuing my community work, expanding workshops to more shelters, and carving out dedicated time for creative writing. I set tentative goals, finish the short story by spring, submit it to a literary magazine by summer, and maintain weekly writing sessions every Sunday afternoon. After packing up, Grandma and I drove home, passing through towns waking to winter's glow. At each stoplight, I looked at her and felt profound appreciation for her unwavering belief, for the pact we forged 1 year ago, and for the countless minutes she spent knitting beside me, both literally and metaphorically, stitching together my resilience. That evening, as I returned to my apartment, I hung the completed family transparency pact on a wall near my desk, a daily reminder of commitments kept and promises honored. I sat at the desk, opened the journal, and began typing the next chapter of my personal and creative journey, confident that truth, like winter's snow, could both conceal and reveal, ultimately serving as the foundation for renewal. And so, Helena Turner's story, born in betrayal, tempered in truth, and blossoming in shared purpose, continued on its course, guided by the steadfast light of transparency and the enduring warmth of a family's love reimagined.